panel, we on the side of the government stand for the equality opportunity, and we believe that in a global world where we have a globalized market, where we have to compete with other countries, this is something which is going to make the citizens of these countries more competitive on those markets, and it's going to make lives better off for them. So first of all, how we would do this? We believe that we would have a certain period of time where, teachers who perhaps are good at their field but don't have that knowledge of knowledge of English, we would provide them with classes. We would after that assess them through different tests, and we would see which ones of them could continue teaching in those schools. Second of all, we tell you that this would be the primary language in these schools, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be using it at all, right? So this means that you will still have communication which would be in your first language. We believe that this is also the best period for these children to learn a foreign language. We believe that it will make them more fluent, which means that they will basically have no different barriers in terms of dealing with other people who are also native speakers. We believe that this is something which will give these children access to other schools and materials, books, courses, etc. We believe that we already have these types of schools in these developing countries. The only difference is that in most cases, these schools are private schools, they're fairly expensive, and only the privileged and the elite can actually use that and make themselves, more competitive and gain that knowledge. So we believe that in the status quo, people who are richer can go to these, and they get a bunch of benefits, which we're going to talk about. We believe that they tend to also get the higher quality teachers, but we believe that the teachers who in the status quo, the best teachers will probably already know English. We believe that they will already have different degrees, as you said, we would give them time to adjust. So we believe that this is what this gives to these people. We believe that also if they want to claim it's going to be difficult for some children to learn this language, we're telling you that studies show that this isn't a problem, especially in this age, and especially since we're talking about English, which you're usually surrounded in the status quo a lot. If you want to do anything on the internet or on the computer, most of the time you will be using that language or watch TV shows and things like that. So we believe that this is something which is going to make it even easier for these children to learn the language. So we believe that because you have now a privileged kids who can use this, now you will have a larger scope of children who can actually apply for different types of scholarships, internships, and jobs which are even in other countries which are maybe of better quality. And we believe that through having that larger scope of children, you're actually going to have better kids who are going to go and educate themselves than just having to choose out of this smaller group which is the privileged group. We believe that through this, we believe that they're going to compete for these things, but we believe that then we will have an even larger case, because we will be able to send more people out, that even more of them we believe that are going to return. This means that they can bring back their knowledge. We believe that this is something which is more likely also through getting those we believe that in terms of even if they don't go and educate themselves only through that knowledge of the language, we believe that they can even work online, which means that they can work for other countries where they would get a higher wage. Maybe it won't be as high as in some of those Western countries, but it will be still higher than their local wage. We believe that this is something which will improve their lives and which generally will make them they will bring that money into the economy of their own countries, and we believe that is also a good thing. But if they go to and take a scholarship or an internship, if they educate themselves, we believe that we have more people who are more likely to return to their countries, which means that we're more likely to have a stronger and bigger middle class. Why that is? Even if they don't earn higher, but in most countries you tend to earn a higher wage if you get higher in your education. We believe that this is something which will inspire you to do so. We believe that even if not, when people are more educated, they tend to push for more rights and they tend to be more aware. This also means that they will have a larger, different sources of information that they can turn to, not only in their primary language, but also in English, which, because it is basically the global language right now, you have different types of sources from different countries which use English to communicate. We believe that so this is something which is also going to give them access to different books and different materials, especially today when we see that education is actually changing, and you can even go to courses online and such. And we believe that once they have this awareness and this knowledge and more information, we believe that they're more likely to push for better standards and better rights in their own countries, because they will be able to do, because of that information, more of a comparison with what is happening in other countries, and not only rely on the information that their own country and their own language gives them. So we believe that this also this also gives them the incentive. This also gives the incentive to other foreign countries to come to those developing countries and put their businesses there, because it makes your communication with the workers way easier, right? It makes but this also like helps the workers themselves, because it means that they can be able to communicate like directly with the people who have hired them, instead of like having to go to translation or maybe a union or whatever. So we believe that this is also because of that a good thing. Third of all, we believe that like we have a lot of developing countries, which are countries which use multiple languages, and where you have to have like where you have basically barriers between communication of people who are of different ethnicities, religions, and such. We believe that this is something which is going to help those children communicate easier, more directly, and we believe that this is especially important since they're in their like age of formations, which means that they can like understand better and get to know better children who are from like other cultures, who live different lifestyles in their country, and we believe that this will create better understanding. So we believe that because in that period of socialization, we believe that school is really important, and the things that your teacher tells you are really important, but also like what your peers think of you. We believe that through this we basically expand the different type of children who are now going to be socializing with one another, and we believe that this is like the period where children tend to realize that not all of that their parents say is an absolute, and we believe that like also because they will be able to like read different media and share materials, which are, because obviously you're going to have to like translate different classes and things. We believe that this is the way that they will be able to come to better understanding and to basically become a more coherent as a society. We also we believe that like through history we have seen examples where from certain countries we had like those richer people send as because they were elites to educate themselves in other countries and come and basically invest in their own country and reconstruct the way that things were done so that they can be done in a better way. We believe that through this we give an equal opportunity for children who aren't that well off and who aren't in that great socioeconomic point, that they can actually improve their lives and improve their countries. For all these reasons, we beg you to vote for the open government.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for the speech and then call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, just because you cannot speak English doesn't mean you cannot compete globally, right? It's very assumptive under their side. We can say, talking about Japan, people cannot mostly speak English, but they develop massively in their technology, and a lot of people coming there. Mostly people adapt to their language. Or secondly, Korea, not much of their people can speak English, but they're being so competitive in their music industry, right? Doesn't mean that you cannot speak English, then you cannot be competitive as well, ladies and gentlemen. We think that don't be afraid that investor won't come to your places. That investor will still come to your places, and they would love to go to developing country, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because they will always love to have competitive labor prices, or you have rich resources that can be sold, for example, right? That is why we don't think it is an urgency for you to say that we need to enforce all people to speak English, because we have the appeal to make those investors to come, ladies and gentlemen. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, even though, right, you want to compete English, you want to compete in international, and you want to go to international competitions, you still have that in our status quo, right? You have the subject in school in which you can always learn about that 3 hours a week, for example, or you have internet that it's all free, you can always access, ladies and gentlemen. We think that in the status quo we always have all way for you to learn English as a subject, ladies and gentlemen, but we We don't have all world interest to teach you Indonesian, all world interest to teach you local language of developing countries, Vietnamese, Burmese, or whatever, right? That is why we think that it's important for us to teach this to teach them and to use the instructions with a local language, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you two things on this debate. I'm going to talk to you how it's going to harm the goal of education, which is the development of their own country. But second of all, how actually you're going to erase the importance identity of this country, right? First thing first, you're going to harm the goal of education, directly engage with their contentions, right? We think that the goal of education is to ensure that the people you educate able to implement their knowledge to build their own country, to contribute back, to improve their countries, right? Which means it requires them to actively interact with their local people, ladies and gentlemen. We think that to know why it is important for them to have this local language, to understand their locals issue and stuff like that. which mean we think that language is the most essential issue that connects students with society. That knowing that not all regions in developing country have educations that can assume that all people speak English, ladies and gentlemen, such as rural area in Papua or rural area in any other country, right? Knowing that they are still speak local language, meaning that it requires you to at least master this language to understand and to attach and to connect their issues, ladies and gentlemen. It's really, really hard for you to understand their issues, to develop these regions, to solve this region's problem if you don't have the common language to speak and to share, ladies and gentlemen. Because this is the basic interaction that going to use to these people, right? That is why we think that those people that becomes the target of our improvement, ladies and gentlemen, still speaks those language. That is why it's important for you to master that, ladies and gentlemen. Then the questions, right? Why then, if we have this English as an instruction, then they will suffer those language? Precisely they will, ladies and gentlemen. Because most of the time you spend most of your time in school, 8 to 12 hours, that makes you easily ignore your local language, that makes you easier to forget that, right? Or you're going to speak with your friends usually with English simply because you're you're adapted to use English mostly, right? That is why we think that it is a basic logic that it will disincentivize you to communicate with someone that speak alien to you, for example, or it's hard for you to understand. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, knowing that there's a lot of incentive for these people to go for global competitions and to go to international competitions and stuff like that, we think that it's less and lesser incentive for these people to stay there and to help their people, right? We think they're going to even strengthen their incentive to go out there, leave the country, and looking for more money out there, maybe instead of their developing country. We think this is the that is the problem that we need to solve right now, right? The reason developing country becomes developing countries is because a lot of smart people being expatriate in other countries, or being scout with other countries, such as Habibi, for example, right? We think that's why what I'm trying to say is that you're going to even reduce the incentive for these people to understand and connect deeper to their local people, ladies and gentlemen. You're even disenfranchise these people from the local problems that you have to understand. We think that this is the basic interactions. Local language is the basic interactions for you to understand the first-hand problem in front of your eyes, right? That is why we think that it's impossible for you to erase this on school. Yes.
Okay, but you still socialize with your family, the rest of the people, then you still live the issues which are going on in your local community. You're not just going to forget it and not be in touch with it. And even if you, up to few generations, lost your primary language, like what would be the inherent value of that if this is what you're trying to defend?
The problem is that when you're talking about your parents, ladies and gentlemen, you're talking in a daily communications. But when you're talking about school, they teach you how you solve, poverties, or how you solve, several issues that directly goes to practical action, right? This is what we need, ladies and gentlemen, the development to this country. And we think that this kind of terms only teach in school in itself, right? That is why you're going to, it's hard for you to understand about, poverties issues, or it's hard for you to understand about certain terms that used by local people, or certain problem that used by local people if you don't understand that language, right? That is why it's not teach when you're at home, because only school that that teach you such things to develop your country, right? What I'm trying to say is that in your house, you're only going to talk daily activity. But at school, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to talk about, how to cure someone with a biological term that is also used in a local language by local people, right? We think that this kind of things that are going to interact you with a practical level with in reality. That is why we think that language is very important to develop their own country, precisely directly what they said, right? But lastly, why we think that local language is very, very important, important that you have to teach in schools, knowing that not other place gonna teach you. We think that it is a universal identity that we cannot lose, ladies and gentlemen, knowing that this language already unified a lot of culture in developing country, ladies and gentlemen, for so many years. We think that this is the only common language that all people can unify with, ladies and gentlemen. And most of the time, the reason why actually they start to compromise one another and share economic benefit, ladies and gentlemen, through this language, knowing that not all educations is right now maybe like developed country, that it's everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this language is still necessary to become a unification key for these peoples. That is why not only it's an identity and historical view that we have to be proud of, we think that government should, for development of the country, we should have local language.
I would like to thank the Leader of Opposition for that speech, and then call upon the Deputy Prime Minister Harrier.
Let me just sort my papers. Opening opposition misses the point and misses our part of the model when we say this is a primary language. This doesn't mean you won't learn your language in schools, so you can have a subject and all those things as well. But when you're learning history, biology, getting out of poverty, you will learn it in English. We don't see how the learning about poverty will be different, just translated into their own language. Let me point out a few points of rebuttal and these kind of stuff. They're talking about like Korea and they can be competitive in this kind of stuff. First of all, we think Korea is highly developed countries and is not comparative in this kind of sense, but also we think this will make these people more competitive on the market, and that's why we are propping this. Precisely because now the investment firms and other don't have language barriers when they're coming to Zimbabwe, when they're coming to African countries, when they're coming to other countries, and can now employ more people from their upper management and middle management as well. We think this is precisely bettering the lives of those people. Second of all, they're talking about you can learn the English in other places, and some people do. We say, okay, these people are not comparative in this debate. The ones who are comparative in this debate are people who don't learn this in school, and we think this is overwhelming majority for the African countries who do not have access to internet and these kind of things, but will now under the status quo, because we think you will have more developmental aid in form of education, and we think that is great. And third of all, we think those people are comparative, those people, okay, this will be beneficial for them as well. Second of all, like we already talked to you about, you won't lose your language because you're still talking with your parents, with your friends, with your peers, but just when you're learning history, you will learn it in that way. And they're talking about you will leave the country in these things as well. We say if that betters your life, okay, but we don't think this will have as high impact because other ties tie you with your country, not just learning English. Yeah, now that I know English, I will run away. And fifth, they're talking about unification, these kind of things. We think this brings crucial unification precisely because you have all of the different dialects, all of the different languages, all of the different wars that were being held in these countries, and when you have a majority minority language that is being taught in those countries, we think English coming in will be viewed as a neutral force which people will follow. What are we talking about? Accessibility and how this impacts people's lives. Because we think knowledge of English, we already proved to you that it will be much easier for people to know it, understand when we implement this policy. What does it mean? It means you have lots of scholarships that you can now attend to because you know English. You can go to developing nations to gather knowledge, and then you can return and better things at home and these kind of things. Or even if you want to escape, we say that it's fine. You are bettering your life. We are propping for those people as well. And there are also, you have equality of opportunity in a sense that you have now access to things you didn't have access to before. Like books that you now don't have to translate, like lecturers that are online right now from Cambridge University, from all of the universities online, like access to professors that now we can get through aid and these kind of things, which we think we will much rather do. And second of all, access to media from the West, access to youth from the West, which all makes you have more opportunities than you have in the status quo. Also, why do we think, no, right now. So why do we think we will send more teachers in these kind of things? The thing that is wrong in the status quo is that we cannot really help those people because we don't know these kind of languages that they teach. So what can we do in the status quo rather than just send money through aid and these kind of things that is highly being minimized by corruption and these kind of things in these states? We can send them professors, and people are willing to teach children right there. We can send them aid through kind of things like books and these kind of things, which now they can use. What does it mean? We think that is crucial because this aid cannot be taken away, because that is education, that is something you carry through for the rest of your life. We think that is the best gift the West can give to the developing nations, and we saw how crucial education was into developing the West as well. That's why we think we can do that under our model and not on your side of the house. But what do we think when we talk about better relations in these kind of things? We're talking about, you have lots of language barriers and dialects that makes people have lower chances of succeeding in the status quo. So you have countryside people who have different dialects and struggle learning in school precisely because they're coming from different backgrounds. They're not used to common language that there is in Belgrade, that there is in capital cities and these kind of things, which all have better schools and in the kind of society. We're putting them now on the whole same level playing field because they all don't know real English that well, and they will all learn the English as well. So we think that this is bringing the crucial leveling of the playing field. But what does that mean? That means when you have 50 or 60 languages and these kind of stuff, we think these people require, first of all, they can have few things. They can go to their local schools who teach in their languages, which are usually not really funded by the government because lots of these governments are really oppressive towards minority languages and minority things, or they don't have these schools at all, so they're being forced to learn some language that they don't really feel comfortable with, like the language of the majority in these countries. What does that mean? These people don't really mingle or don't really send their kids to school in this kind of sense. What does it mean? We think that on our side of the house, more kids from different backgrounds and from different ethnicities would be going to the school in the same area. What does that mean? That means we bring crucial understanding and knowing of the people from those areas, which brings more understanding and less chances for escalation of conflict. I want POI because time is ending. Yes?
Yeah, I think that your proposal is not sustainable in the sense that economic trajectory always changes through time. It might be Western-centric, but it's now currently moving to the east. China, Japan, India, Indonesia are rising. Your proposal does not bring anything.
When it comes to that, we can change it to China. Right now, it's still Eurocentric. It still brings you comparative advantage to know English. Even all of the Chinese business people know English. We think, though your points are not really that relevant, we still think that English is the main source of trade, and best schools are currently in the West, sadly. But we think we will change that on our side of the house when we get more trainers and more teachers on there. What does that mean? You have now neutral language that is being viewed as English. Like, let me continue my point about better relations. So when you see people from different backgrounds and from different ethnicities going to school together because now they can, because now they're learning in the same language, we think you're gaining the crucial understanding between them. You're having some bonds, which means you will have political capital for them not to fight each each other, which we are seeing in developing world. We think this is a crucial point. This brings stability, this brings betterment for those people because now they have more job opportunities, they have more chances to succeed, more chances to gain scholarships. We think if the worst case scenario, they won't break EFL and the WUDC. That's why we are extremely proud to propose.
I would like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech and then call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Got my water. Sorry.
I think in developing countries, what you need to do is you need to have an inner-oriented building mindset for your society rather than the global-oriented, like what opening government said. But because what you need in developing countries is that your scholars, your graduates, go back into your country and build your countries, not gaining their own interest and profit and give more benefit from other countries, ladies and gentlemen. That's the burden of proof that government need to show to you. Why? By using English and send all people abroad, then suddenly the development and building can go inside, ladies and gentlemen. But I will talk about two issues in my speech. First, why using mother language is the best way to make these people understand about those particular subject. But secondly, why only with mother language development of this country can be better. Firstly, why mother language is best way to make these people understand? Because they taught you that, look, you need to understand English so you can access all the scholarship and you can access all education abroad. Firstly, they never told us why status quo is enough, right? There's never proof from them that, look, why status quo is enough, what is lacking under government progress, no analysis coming whatsoever, right? Because we believe that status quo is completely progressing, because just because you're not using English as your primary language there doesn't mean you're not being teach English at all, right? You can still learn English later on. But most importantly, your first primary language need to be your mother language, which I will explain later on. Moreover, when a lot of books are being translated, right, and you still understand those language anyway, we believe the accessibility of your insight of your native people to access all of the knowledge that come from abroad is accessible, ladies and gentlemen. They talk about, look, investor will come because more people speak English. Well, I think regardless of what your language is, if investors see that if investors see that your countries is, for example, lucrative for their investment, they will come regardless, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about language, right? So it's not exclusively under language. But ladies and gentlemen, this is, if they want this student to develop well so much, we believe the best way to do that is using their mother language. Because what you need to understand in developing countries, like not everyone is already good English, then suddenly they can understand all of the complicated things that need to be told in the introduction, in the instruction book, right? Because ladies and gentlemen, like this mother language has been used for hundreds of years. Like this is the language that understand the most. When you make them change to English, we believe that it's going to be hard for them to understand those subjects. Because sometimes the best way for you to understand some particular subject is when you understand it first through your own interpretation, which is through your own language, ladies and gentlemen. Learning it from a second language like English is going to make the progress even longer, right? So we believe that the progress of making these people understand will give much slower and lesser under their side of the house. But moreover, when people in developing countries have different privilege and different starts of who can have a better English of who cannot have a better English. For example, in Indonesia, Jakarta people are so privileged, like most of people can speak English, but people in Papua cannot speak English at all. You will create a gap of and a disparity of development under their version of country. In fact, mother language is the thing that can unify all of people, for example, from Papua to Aceh, then they can have a same learning ability in learning those subjects, ladies and gentlemen. Those improvement under your side can only be get by those privilege, and that's incredibly harmful, and those disparity going to be much higher, which I will explain in my second issue. But secondly, why English and why using mother language is incredibly important for these people to get them back and develop this country, right? Because we believe that they told you that, look, just because you use it as primary language at school doesn't mean that you will leave your mother language. We believe the possibility of that is incredibly high, because when you use English from your kindergarten until your college, means that the orientations of parents on all children in Indonesia, for example, will look, I need to study English so I can understand all of the subject at school well, right? Mean that you will incentivize people to start teaching English for their kids until their kids. More likely, the possibility of them leaving their mother language is incredibly high. Why is that harmful? Because first, language is the part that you make them feel that you are part of a certain country. It's been used by hundreds of years by your people. As we did explain to you, it's part of your identity. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, all of the working orientation inside your language use not English, but use your mother language. All of the developing project in Papua, for example, use your mother language, not use English, ladies and gentlemen. Because when you make all of these subjects are English oriented, when these graduates are faced with choice, look, exactly the best case scenario, these people opt out to abroad. These people are given choice, like, look, when there is this job from Indonesia that use in Indonesian language, and there is this job that coming from abroad using English, which I already learned from my whole life, which kind of job these people choose? These people will choose not to take in those jobs in Indonesia, but these people will choose to take jobs from abroad, and this is incredibly harmful. But before I continue closing,
The reason why people have to go outside under the status quo is that because the people cannot learn English inside of the country. After taking this one, people can stay inside of that country to learn new things.
then why these people will get to have the incentive to keep inside when they have the opportunity to learn outside, when all of the job opportunity inside using your mother language, ladies and gentlemen. And this is incredibly harmful when these people choose to opt out from this country and choose international orientations. Why? Because in developing countries, you need these graduates of university to work inside this country to have so you have a good resource. You have a good quality resource of human resource, so they can build from the inside, right? You need engineer and stuff and jobs like that to work inside your countries and build from inside and take all of the project, ladies and gentlemen. So under their size, rural areas that doesn't understand English, like Papua, for example, as I told you, will get more left behind when those people job orientation are so Indonesian and the only language that understand are Indonesians, and people have no incentive to build from inside and get out from countries and have an international working experience. We believe that the human resource will be left will go abroad, and then all of the quality human resource that is needed to build the countries will go on. And in order for them to incentivize them to keep inside the countries, you need to use your mother language. You're very proud.
I would like to thank the leader of the for that speech, and then moving on to the second. Today, the floor to the member of the chair here.
the reason why the developing country like Philippines and Malaysia struggling under the status quo to compete against the developed country like United States of America or Korea or Japan, which happen to be lucky enough to prosper in the past, is that two key aspects of the language division under the status quo. The first one is the language division is inside of the country with the context of many diverse culture and languages existing inside of the country like Malaysia and Philippines. For example, China-oriented languages or Malay-oriented languages. And the second one is a division from the outside of the world because they use the primarily language, as for example Philippine, you can't communicate with the English speakers. Those two key aspects of language division hinders those countries to prosper and overtake the country like Japan or Korea, right? So, two extension from the closing government is firstly cultural justification why to set the English as a primary language is the most fair way towards the minority group of the people exist within the country like Malaysia, and secondly why it must be primary, not the secondly or third, to instill the value or instill the capability to speak that language to compete in a tough negotiation table of the businesses or industries or academic field. So, but before that, several responses towards the deputy leader of the opposition. So, main point coming from the opening opposition was how culture is important for them. And they said because the 12 hours is important for them to speak the primary, the mother language for them, this is very important. But so much so, in order to understand the English, in order to acquire the ability of the English as a native speaker, you need to have the 12 hours a day to be educated the English as well. The window of the language window point of view differs from the language towards language. However, because of that, we believe the English must be primary language in the instruction of the education. And they say the culture will be extinct. We believe, realistically speaking, the culture would not extinct. The comparative here is that even if the culture decreases and after taking this plan to some extent, the important thing you need to understand is that whatever primary language you set in this country, you're going to exclude some part of minority group nonetheless. That's why you need to understand the English, the fearless medium for everybody in that country to understand in most cases. And thirdly, they talked about outward flow, how those people or human resources are going to escape from the country towards the foreign country. To which we say that, as I pointed out in my point of information, we believe that the reason why people go outside under the status quo is because people cannot learn those kind of technological, those kind of language or English-oriented education inside of the country. We believe two harms under this, because the status quo is harsher than after taking this plan, because the environment to learn English or environment to learn West-oriented curriculum is not established yet in those Philippines or Malaysia. That's why we have to set the primary language as English. And second criteria is that it is unfair. Under the status quo to go to learn those kind of Western-oriented language or education is only limited towards the privileged people, for example, rich or privileged people, for example, the mother language for them is equal to primary language is inside of that country. We believe this is extremely unfair for those people. And thirdly, they say mother language is the best. We follow the opening government. We are going to set the transmission stage to go to the next stage. Therefore, we believe to reach to the mother language is in long term not problematic. So going on to my extension. So firstly, inside division, we believe in a context like those developing country, we believe that minority group are existing to a larger extent in the side of the country. So it is rather equal for them to and new to everybody in that country to learn the English rather than primary language existing in the country. In that case, we don't use some random language which benefit nobody. However, use English as the primary language in that country. And secondly, and we also believe if you're going to continue to use the primary language as the most major language in that education, you cannot change the hierarchy between the ethnicity inside of the country, right? We believe to break down those hierarchy existing those country, we believe it is must be fair to any kind of minority group in that country. And secondly, in the aspect of the society, we believe to compete against the businesses coming from the Western world, we have to teach them to a significant level of capability in order to transmit your culture or industry or your idea which is oriented in your culture. You must learn how to express those kind of things towards the foreign country. And we believe uniquely in a developing country, the exports or those kind of interaction with the Western world is crucial, essential for those countries to overtake the country which is existing under the status quo. We believe the tough negotiation table inside of the business or intense level of academic competition or those very new and competitive market, for example, the technological field or medical technology, we believe English must be taught through those people. Yes, opinion.
The reason why US lend Indonesia technology is not because they speak English, because they want to have a cheap method, ladies and gentlemen. So just because you speak English doesn't mean that all international will be nicer to you.
We believe English is not like, just because you can speak English, it's not like free ticket for you to be like perfect in the global context. What we believe on our side of the house is comparatively on the other side of the house, majority of the people is going to get more competitive to compete against the foreign people. That's the benefit what we'd like to show to your side of the house. We believe, for example, those most new technological field, academic field, is Latin oriented, and the technological terms you need to learn or you need to express towards the foreign professors must be English. That's why we believe the English must be the primary language. And also in terms of the culture, for example, if you look at the K-pop Bollywood, everybody uses English to export that culture towards the foreign language. And under the status quo, it is only limited towards the privileged people who have the power of the advertisement or the money, right? In order to reach out those kind of capability towards everybody inside of the country, and in order to make it most fair, we believe this motion should stand. Thank you.
I would like to thank the member of the for the speech and then call upon the member of opposition. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, school is more than just a place of transfer of knowledge, but it is also a transfer of values, identity, and a sense of unity between these people. And oftentimes, this is the values and identity that comes very, very subtly attacked inside people, that people become unaware that they're losing their identity, an important uniting factor inside their community that can furthermore sacrifice the ways and entry point of interaction between each other. We think that the accessibility of people being successful inside the global context just merely because they speak more English is challengeable, because it's contingent also on that person's skills and person's ability to compete, but the possibility of harm is more definite in the case that we're sacrificing the quality of transfer of knowledge and also the idea that school can transfer more values and identity towards these people, right? Before I'm going to explain to you why this is important, extending opening arguments about opening's explanation more comprehensively as to how there is a necessity to preserve national language, and second of all, how it would promote independence of knowledge inside the country, I would firstly rebut some points of the government side of the house. Like, first of all, they rely on the idea that the primary language used in education should rely on the current economic superpower existing in that country. What we're trying to point out in our POI is that irrespective of what language is currently the international language existing in the world, we think that the idea that education should follow the current superpower economic is something unsustainable because you're always going to constantly change once economic is shifted through somewhere else. For example, when it's shifted to China, one, is logically exhaustive for a developing country to always fulfill that demand. But second of all, we think that there's other alternative in which we should impose a national independence in which I'm going to explain in my argument. But second of all, let's compare about inequality and disparity, because there has been a dialogue in opening government, it's in opening when one is saying that you're going to amplify the inequality of language skills, and one said that you're going to amplify the inequality of quality of knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. We think that at the end of the day, what's sacrificed under government side of the house is that you're going to sacrifice the quality of knowledge, not only that people have different starting points, but also you're relying on teachers who are from past generations who are very, very less exposed to language. Mind you, this logistical possibility shall also be challenged because most developed countries just cannot afford to do that. What's most dangerous about sacrificing the quality of knowledge is that you're also sacrificing the initial capital of knowledge current generation could be able to transfer to those next generation at the end of the day, so that's why that is important. But yes, of course.
Okay, we have a huge problem with lack of quality education in most developing nations. We show you how uniquely solve this by sending professors and having access to more books, media, and these sort of things. Please answer to that.
But why cannot you just make your own books and media in the future in your own national language? There's a burden that cannot be proven there. I know it's hard, but what's sustainable is necessary because we cannot always rely to other superpower country, right? So arguments, two things, right? Why is it important to preserve the national language? Look, as much as they can say that identity should be there, they never analyze the context of developing countries in which most of these nations do not even share the initial same language to begin with. They're consisting of thousands of tribes such as in Indonesia and China, and when they're born and when they're little, before they enter school, they do not fluently speak that national official language in the very first place. We think that school is currently the only systematic formal education to impose it. But why is it important? We think that exactly in the globalized context, in a world of cultural interaction that already allows English and other superior culture, namely the Western culture, to dominate conversations and cultural perception, in fact, it is more necessary to provide medium where national language can thrive and unite people. At the end of the day, English cannot be this global language who unite them, because we need something that is not only inclusive, but exclusive at the same time, that can create an attachment from people from this various community to also have a sense of national identity. And English is a global language that is shared not only within that country, but also someone else's. This allowing you as a person to connect with other ethnicity inside your own country. But second of all, we think that school, as a responsible education provider, is not only one that tries to transfer knowledge, but also values since early ages. That's why it is even more important and a more important responsibility of the school to encourage and mandate the use of national language as an important identity that is subtly and continuously imposed to people to say that you have a certain nationality that binds you. Why does this argument matter? Because success of these people on the government side of the house cannot be guaranteed just under English language skills, but the harm of losing identity is going to be definite. Second of all, how it would create better independency of knowledge within the states. Look, learning other language, it's hard. But learning your own language for academic purposes is also as hard, ladies and gentlemen. That is why in most developing countries, we are deprived of academic resources and research paper written in our languages. We rely on Google Translate translating an English research paper to actually to gain knowledge and to gain supportive facts about our paper. It also denies the ability for us to find circumstances or logic that actually applies to our country and our nationality and relies on the characterizations of other countries. We think that once you actually have English dominating your academic education, it is also going to diminish the chance of a country, especially developing ones that have not yet have a good curriculum of even learning their own language, to actually improve within their language capability to do research paper and academic paper. But why having your own paper or academic researchers and sources of knowledge within your own language is important? What? Because we can be independent. We do not have to rely on other countries and current economic superpower that is continuously changing. But second of all, within that education and knowledge is supposed to be about inclusivity. Because as much as government would want to deny, there has still going to be disparity of economies in which people have less English than the other. That is why national language as the most understandable language that you speak not only in your school but also in your houses should be the language of that sources of knowledge. Not to mention that we have also older generations and elders that we need to interact with that sources of knowledge. Within that, at the end of the day, only closing opposition can provide you an analysis as to how the harms of losing identity is definite. And second of all, we can create independency, especially by learning making our national language a primary curriculum and not the otherwise. Thank you.
This scarf yours? Speech and then floor to the ultimate whip here.
Two things to talk about. Firstly, I will talk about which is better for the development of the developing country, and secondly, I will explain that in which paradigm it is better for the unity, and which is better to include the minority as the nationalism or the unity and so on. So, before moving on that point, I have some refutation for the closing opposition. The closing opposition has said that there will be a worse quality of the knowledge. However, there are several responses for them. Firstly, we can teach the other knowledge in the other subjects because there's other subject in the school. So there is not so much harm. And moreover, we say the opposition side said that there is a English. We cannot transfer the information by their mother language. However, the Deputy Prime Minister has said that there will be English sources and it will be better in our paradigm. And the closing opposition has said that it should be written in national language. However, in these cases, what is harmful is that minority who don't share the first language in the developing country will suffer from the lack of the information. Therefore, by using English, which can be understood by all of the citizens, is better to transfer their cultures or their knowledges. So there is a first response. And secondly, about the knowledges. However, the CEO has said that it is the problem. However, before translating paper, in order to understand it in English, in our side, and this ability must be available in every. must be available for the everybody. So their point is not so important. So let me move on to our first point, that which is good for development of the country. The opening opposition has said that it is harmful because we cannot talk with local people. However, as government has said, continuing to saying that they can still speak their first language because they speak with family or friends and so on. And moreover, we say their harm is short term. It is because if all people learn the English after several decades, there is no harm about the miscommunication with the local people who can only speak the local people. But and and moreover, we say there is more benefit to work with the foreign country which have huge technology and so on than local people. Therefore, their harm is not so big and also short term. And secondly, they have said that local people will go out and there will be less workforce in the developing country. However, as the government has said, that foreign people will flow into the developing country because they can use English and they can work in the developing country. Therefore, there is no concern about the workforce. And moreover, we say people who left their mother country, they give a benefit for their home country. It is because they have incentive to benefit their country, because by comparing the foreign country and their mother country, they feel the necessity to improve the status of the developing country. Therefore, they have an incentive to benefit their home country. And moreover, we say they have a patriotism, they have a nationalism, they love a country. Therefore, they have an incentive to improve their situation and benefit their country. So it is not. It is not so. This is not so important. And in contrary, the clothing government explained that there will be an export and there will be a broadened business. And why it is so important? It is because other ex-developing country like Singapore developed by the export and getting money from foreign countries. And moreover, we say many developing countries depends on only one industry or only one export, and the economy is unstable. Therefore, there is a dire necessity to broaden the business or broaden and diverse the things to export. Therefore, it is uniquely beneficial for the developing country, and there is a long term, more than the several decades, long term benefit for the developing countries' development. Therefore, CZ is better for the development of the developing country. So yes.
If you're suffering of information, we are happy in a status quo. Google adjusts directly to their local language. So right now, if we're
in such cases, it is a troublesome, and they have to take more steps to understand the language. However, in the case of our product, we can understand what is written in the English so fast. Therefore, it is more efficient, and there will be more incentive to get more information. So our side is better, and our side is much better than opposition program. And secondly, I will explain about the unity and inclusive for minority. The opening opposition has said that English will erase the unity. Also, closing opposition has said English erase unity. However, there is other factor that create a nationalism. For example, they share the same leader or they share the same history. Therefore, they will not lose the unity. However, there is no way to share their nationalism with majority people and minority people. However, in our product, by using English, we can majority people and minority people can share the same leader and share their nationalism. Therefore, there will be much more better unity. So, and in conclusion, what I have said, what closing governments have said in this debate, the opening government has said the general benefit for the developing country or individual. However, the closing government has said the specific benefit for the minority. So this is the big contribution, and also we have told you that it will benefit the whole economy, which which give better impact on people also who don't speak the English because of the development of the developing country. And moreover, I have said that it will be better for the development of the country, and it will unify the minority people better than the opposition plan, and therefore we proud to propose this motion.
I would like to thank the corporate whip for that speech and then call upon the opposition whip to close the debate on behalf of
Panel, we think that the whole case of government that trying to explain that if you're able to speak and learn English, meaning that it will guarantee your success, is something that is really assumptive because it's contingent to so many things. We say that your possibility, whether or not you're going to travel to foreign lands to work or not, it's highly dependent on yourself. Not to mention that currently a lot of countries are rejecting immigrants, so it's harder for you to travel to that specific country. And second of all, we also think that your chances of success in a work rely on so many things. It rely on whether or not your boss like you, it rely on whether or not you are skillful rather than only linguistic skills. So at the end of the day, we think that their burden to prove if people understand English equal to success is really high. In my speech today, I will explain two things. I will explain why currently the structural barrier for you to learn languages compared to your native language, it's harder and it does not serve the purpose of education to give a better understanding. Second of all, I will say why it's going to be harmful for national identity. But first, I'm going to have one independent rebuttal towards closing government. No thanks. Closing government say that currently there is a hierarchy of ethnicity, that if you're trying to impose national language to these people, it's going to disenfranchise minority. However, we don't understand why learning other languages will suddenly empowering the minority. Because learning English, which English is a formal language in which the country the country that used to colonialize half of the words are using will not be empowering for this minority. Instead, they will be overwhelming, because not only that they will be overwhelming by the existing majority, but will also be overwhelmed by the cultures and the by the impositions of Western cultures towards them. That at the end of the day will not be helpful for this ethnicity. If you say that there is a lack of information, we're more than happy as opposing opposition to provide more information in our national language to begin with. Now, first I'm going to talk about competition as a justification, whether or not as an educational institution, competition should be our basic justification. We think that education institutions is not a coliseum. We do not train students to be a gladiator and only to compete in a global market. We think that the justification that's saying that we need to compete is a wrong justification, because I already said in my POI that there are a trend that keep changes over time. The economic trajectory, the political trajectory always changes. It does not always fit to Eurocentric, and we think that it will be really bothersome and would be really hard if you're always trying to, if you're already trying to suit yourself towards the trend that happening globally, and this is not something that is effective to begin with. Second, we think that the ability that trying to say that if we want to success and if we want to compete with global world, then we need to fit their languages is a toxic. We think that what doing it is to strengthen our national identity and our national language, and to let these people learning our language. It happened in Japan, it happened in Korea. It forces multinational company to go inside the country to learn their languages instead of us learning in English. We think that there is a better mechanism complete to their side of the house, because in their side of the house there is definite harm in which that we are forgetting our national identity, and we're trying to forget what we learned for, and we are condoned to the Western supremacy, something that should not happen inside status quo. But second of all, I will talk about what are the basic principles of education. We say that before you can compete, the basic means of education is let you understanding what you are studying.
We think that process of learning does not only happen in school currently, but also mostly integrated in home. We say that their proposal bring a definite harm because now currently parents that help you studying and doing homework inside homes and rehearse what you get in school could not help you to do that because there is a generation gap before this policy being enacted and after this policy being enacted. The older generation might not understand English or other language that they want to propose inside status quo. Therefore, they might not able to understand the instruction inside the book if it exists or helping the children to learn at home. So what might happen in their side of the house is that there will be an even bigger disparity because of course those who can learn in home are those who are rich, who are able to pay for private tutor to come and help them learn, and those are who are privileged. Those who are underprivileged that usually rely for their parents to study or even their older siblings cannot do that currently, and this is even harmful. In comparative, in our side of the house, the trade-off is that probably we might not able to communicate in English as that good, or we might not able to speak English, but we think that at least we're able to understand the basic competency of the things that you learn in school enable you to compete in the global world, because language is only a means of communications, but what is more important and intrinsic to you is your ability. It's your knowledge that you gain in school, and this is important to learn in school. Closing.
So you say preservation of the culture is important. However, in order to expand or sell your body or industry, we told you need to understand, you need to have the capability of speaking English to the extent of the primary language.
However, we don't need every people in the nation to able to speak English. We only need certain proxy. We only need some people to able to speak English, and that already exists. But second of all, I'm going to talk about the other structural barrier, which is access to books and access to supplementary tools. Because they say that in order for us to learn, we need this book that being provided by English. But in developing country, we say that sometimes it's even hard for us to get books, and books is just not primary tool for you to learn. So your primary tool to learn is the direct communication by the teacher, is the oral explanation by the teacher, and this is the most important barrier that exists inside status quo. So if you don't understand what the teacher are explaining to you, and you cannot even ask that in home to your parents, we think that that's going to create a problems in you understanding what being taught by the teachers before you can have an access to that supplementary tools. But second of all, we think that what's being important and does not being talked much inside the status quo is how it's going to send a message that your national language has no place formally, and we just need to condone to Western-centric domination. We already say currently that English is not a good identity that can tie it because it's become a global language. You do not have certain attachment to this English. However, what is more important is that national language. We agree to opening government that say that sometimes there is a different language being taught differently at local levels. Because informally people speak in their mother tongue, they speak English, Tamil, and other language that exists in their tongue, but they need one languages that tying them and that make them share one identity. We think that national language is better as that because it's inclusive to all people who living in that specific area, but it's also exclusively tied to only that nations without incorporating other nations. And this is something that is exclusive in our side and does not being have by the government side of the house. So what we have been said is that in order for us to rise as a nation, we do not need to follow the trend being set by other nations, but we need to set our trends, and we're better with that.